The rain hadn't let up in hours. It fell in steady, soaking sheets that turned the streets of Manhattan into shallow rivers. Amelia's sneakers were soaked through, squelching with each step as she pushed through the wind toward the towering glass front of the high-rise. The delivery bag over her shoulder dripped, and the food container inside had already started to steam from the contrast of heat and cold. She was freezing, drenched to the bone, and this was her last order of the night. All she wanted was to drop it off and disappear. The doorman didn't say anything as she walked in, just looked at her with the kind of glance that said she didn't belong. But her name was on the list, and the order came with direct instructions. Deliver to the top floor, use the private elevator, no questions, no contact. She stepped into the polished metal box of the elevator, watching herself in the reflection of its brushed gold walls. Her hoodie clung to her arms, her leggings stuck to her skin, and her tank top was soaked all the way through. She looked like a mess. By the time she reached the penthouse floor, everything around her whispered wealth. The air smelled like clean linen and subtle cologne. The floor was marble. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, framing a rain-soaked skyline. It felt like stepping into another world. She didn't see anyone, just silence. She walked past the grand piano and into the open kitchen area, setting the delivery bag down gently on the black granite counter, careful not to drip too much water. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the wet hoodie off. She glanced around quickly. The instructions hadn't said anyone would be home. The lights were low. The space was quiet. Maybe the owner wasn't in. Maybe they had staff to clean this all up. Her tank top stuck to her body uncomfortably, and the heat of the apartment made the wet fabric feel worse against her skin. She spotted what looked like a guest bathroom down the hallway. Just a quick second to dry off. That was all. She wasn't stealing anything. She wasn't even exploring. She just needed a damn towel. The bathroom was elegant in that way expensive things are, understated and spotless. A towel warmer glowed quietly near the door. She peeled off her tank top and wrung it out, then unclipped her bra. Her skin prickled from the sudden warmth of the room. She grabbed one of the plush white towels and wrapped it around herself, breathing in the scent of something expensive and clean. She leaned over the counter, letting her forehead rest against the mirror, trying to calm her heartbeat. Then a voice cut through the silence. Low, calm, male. I see the food made it up. Her entire body went stiff. She turned slowly, towel clutched tightly at her chest. He was standing in the doorway. Tall, clean-shaven, rolled sleeves and an open collar. His hair was slightly tousled, like he'd run his hand through it in frustration. She recognized the face from tabloids, from headlines. Billionaire, CEO, off-limits, dangerous, domin something. Her voice cracked as she spoke. I'm sorry. I didn't think anyone was home. I only needed to dry off. He held her gaze, unreadable. Then, without a word, he stepped forward, pulled another towel from the warmer, and offered it to her. She didn't move. Couldn't. You'll get sick if you stay like that, he said, his tone almost indifferent. She took the towel, hands trembling. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I should go, she whispered. You should finish drying off first, he said. Why? He met her eyes. Because I don't like seeing someone shiver unless I'm the one making them. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing barefoot in his guest bathroom, wet, exposed, and unsure if she had just stepped into a mistake or the beginning of something dangerous. Amelia Carter had never belonged to places like this. Raised in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens with a mother who worked 2 shifts and a younger brother who barely kept himself out of trouble, her life had always been about survival. Dreams were a luxury she couldn't afford. She worked as a food delivery girl not because she loved the job, but because it was the only thing flexible enough to work around her classes at the community college and still let her bring home enough money to help with the bills. Most nights she came home sore, exhausted, and invisible. That was safe. She knew how to be invisible. She didn't know how to be seen, especially not by someone like Daman Rourke. He wasn't just rich. He was the kind of rich that didn't make sense. The kind of rich that didn't just buy things, but changed cities. CEO of Rourke Tech, one of the biggest private innovation firms in the country, Daman had been featured in Forbes before he turned 30. He rarely spoke to the media. He didn't date publicly. No scandals, no slip-ups, no signs of softness. The world saw him as a myth, a machine, efficient, ruthless, and terrifyingly precise. And yet the man who offered her a towel had been quiet, unbothered, not angry, not arrogant, just watching. She had expected yelling, accusations, security. Instead, she got heat in his voice and a look in his eyes that made her skin flush hotter than the towel wrapped around her. She'd left the bathroom that night as quickly as she could, her damp clothes in a tight roll beneath her arm, heart thundering as she walked past him without a word. He didn't stop her, but he watched, and she felt it, felt him. Like gravity itself had shifted in that penthouse, and now she was walking around with its pull still wrapped around her chest. She told herself it was over, a weird, humiliating blip in an otherwise forgettable week. But the next night she got a notification, same building, same floor, another delivery. Her stomach twisted. She should have rejected it, should have passed it on to another driver, but she didn't. She put on her driest hoodie, tied her hair back, and rode the elevator again. This time when the doors opened, he was already waiting. "You're late," he said, not looking up from the tablet in his hand. Her voice was steady. "The rain." He nodded once. "Leave the food on the table." She hesitated, then stepped in. The room felt different, dimmer, softer, like it remembered her too. As she placed the bag down, she heard him speak again. "You dried off this time." She didn't answer. She didn't know how. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "What's your name?" She blinked. "You don't need to know my name. I'm just the delivery girl." He finally looked up. "I'm not asking because I need to. I'm asking because I want to." Her heart did something strange in her chest. She didn't give it to him that night, but she came back again. And again. Over the next week, she delivered to the penthouse 5 times. Every time she swore it was the last. Every time she found herself standing in front of his door again. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. But each time, the air between them thickened, charged with something neither of them acknowledged. She learned that Daman didn't talk to anyone unless he had to, that his staff communicated through assistants, that he worked late, stayed late, existed in a world most people only saw through headlines and tinted windows. But when she was there, something in him shifted. He asked questions about her classes, her family, her favorite book. Once he offered her coffee. She declined. Her hands were shaking. There was no flirting, no touching, but it felt like standing too close to a fire. She didn't want it. Not really. But she also didn't want to walk away. The last night of the week, the rain was worse than ever. Her scooter hydroplaned on 5th Avenue, and she arrived at the building with soaked jeans, a bruised hip, and a bag of food that barely stayed warm. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. When she stepped into the penthouse, she saw him, already at the dining table, sleeves rolled up, shirt unbuttoned at the throat. He stood when he saw her limp. What happened? She waved it off. Nothing serious, just slippery roads and bad breaks. He didn't smile. He walked toward her, took the bag, and set it aside. Then he said, "Take off your shoes. You're dripping." She hesitated. "It's fine. I have floors that cost more than your scooter. Take them off." His voice wasn't cruel, just firm. She obeyed, feeling stupid and wet and painfully aware of every drop sliding down her skin. He disappeared into another room and returned a moment later with a towel, again. Only this time, when she reached for it, he didn't let go immediately. His hand brushed hers, warm, intentional. She looked up. "You don't belong in this storm," he said softly. "Then why do I keep showing up in it?" she asked, hating the shake in her voice. He didn't answer, just lifted the towel and began drying her arm slowly, reverently, like it mattered. And in that moment, something between them cracked open. Amelia Carter, the invisible girl from Queens, had no idea what game she'd just stepped into. And Damon Rourke, the billionaire who never let anyone close, was about to discover that some storms didn't knock, they soaked their way in. She told herself not to come back. Told herself that what happened in that penthouse, in the slow pass of a towel across her skin, and the silence that followed, was a mistake, dangerous, unprofessional. She wasn't that kind of girl, and he wasn't the kind of man who noticed women like her, unless he was bored. But boredom didn't look the way Damon Rourke looked at her. It didn't follow her out of the building. It didn't burn under her skin hours later when she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every breath, every word, every second. She skipped the next delivery, let another driver take it, but then a note appeared in her delivery app. Client request, specific name, her name. Refusal flagged. She should have reported it. Instead, she went. When the doors opened this time, she didn't step in hesitantly. She walked into the room like she had stopped pretending. And this time, he didn't stay by the window. He met her halfway. "You ignored the last delivery," he said. "I'm not on your payroll," she replied. He studied her, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he turned and said, "I made you coffee." She followed him into the kitchen like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she hadn't come here soaking wet and wrapped in borrowed warmth less than a week ago. The cups were already set out, steam curling gently from each. She took the one he handed her and held it, both hands wrapped around the ceramic. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally. "You don't know me." He leaned against the counter, sleeves rolled again, tie abandoned somewhere. "Maybe that's the point. Everyone else I know has a reason to be here. You don't." "That's not enough," she said. "Then maybe I'm just selfish." She didn't speak. He took a sip, set the cup down, and said, "You remind me of something I forgot I wanted." The air thickened. Her voice came out lower. "And what's that?" "Real." After that night, it wasn't about deliveries anymore. He texted her, not often, just enough, just little things. "Do you prefer black coffee or sugar? Do you read before bed? Do you like storms or silence?" At first she didn't respond, but eventually she did. One-word answers that turned into full sentences. Sentences that turned into hours of conversations they never planned to have. And slowly, she realized he wasn't trying to impress her. He was just being. The man everyone called a machine had a quiet to him that wasn't cold, just careful. A silence that wasn't dismissive, just tired. And the more she spoke, the more he listened. Not with the intent to reply, with the intent to understand. And that changed everything. One night, she arrived before he texted. She didn't have a reason. She just came. He opened the door like he'd been waiting. "You're early," he said. "You're surprised?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, just glad." He let her in. No questions, no explanations, just space. The room was dim, lights low, the skyline glowing through the massive windows. She stood near the edge, arms crossed, watching the city. He joined her silently. After a long moment, she said, "I don't understand you. I don't expect you to. Then what do you want?" He didn't answer at first. Then he turned toward her, eyes steady. "To see what happens when you stop holding yourself so tightly." She didn't breathe. Couldn't. And then he did something unexpected. He reached out, not to touch, not to pull, just to lift a strand of hair from her face, gently tucking it behind her ear. It wasn't sexual. It was reverent. and it undid her. "You don't know where I've been," she whispered. "I don't care," he said. "You're here now." And in that moment she realized something dangerous. She wanted to be. Their pattern wasn't simple. It wasn't dates or dinners or declarations. It was presence. He worked. She read. They didn't speak unless they meant it. Sometimes she'd come in and sit on his couch with a mug of tea he made without asking. Sometimes she brought takeout and ate beside him while he reviewed contracts. Once, she fell asleep on his couch. When she woke up, a blanket was over her, the lights dimmed, and he was seated in the chair beside her, watching her breathe like she was the only thing in the room that moved. Still, no lines were crossed, no hands wandered, but the tension lived in every look, in every almost, until the night that wasn't almost. She arrived in the middle of a storm, again, drenched, again. He opened the door and froze. She was soaked through, hoodie clinging to her arms, hair stuck to her cheeks. She stepped in without a word, kicking off her shoes, eyes on his. "I'm not here to deliver anything tonight," she said. "I know," he replied. "I'm not here to talk either." "Then what are you here for?" he asked, voice low. She swallowed. "To stop pretending this isn't happening." He took a step closer, then another. His hand reached up slowly, fingers brushing her jaw, sliding wet strands behind her ear. "If I touch you now," he whispered, "I won't stop." "Then don't." He didn't move for a second, just looked at her, really looked. And then he kissed her. It wasn't slow, it wasn't rushed. It was everything held back, now let loose. Her hands gripped his shirt, his mouth devoured hers. When he pulled back, breath ragged, he whispered against her lips, "Tell me if you want me to stop." She shook her head. "No, I want you to see me." He stepped back slightly, eyes scanning her soaked clothes. "Then take them off," he said quietly. Not a demand, a request, a permission. And she did, slowly, carefully, like every layer peeled back wasn't just fabric, but history, pain, fear. And when she stood there in nothing but her skin, he didn't touch her. He looked at her like she was art, a moment, a sunrise he didn't expect. And then he said, "You're beautiful." She laughed once, breathless. "You say that like I'm not broken." "We're all broken," he replied, "but you're the only person I've ever seen who still shines through the cracks." And when he wrapped that same towel around her again, it wasn't about drying her. It was about holding her together. After that night, she told herself she wouldn't return. She told herself that what happened between them was a lapse, a moment born of weather and heat, and months of want she hadn't admitted until it was already too late. But the towel he wrapped around her still smelled like his cologne 3 days later, and the bruised softness of his fingers on her skin kept replaying every time she tried to sleep. She had been naked in front of a man before, but never like that. Never while being looked at, as if she was the answer to a question he didn't know he was asking. It wasn't about sex. It was about being seen, and that terrified her more than anything else ever had. But she came back. Of course she did, not because he called her. He didn't. Not because he begged. He wouldn't. She came back because she couldn't stay away. When she walked into the penthouse that time, he wasn't in a suit. He was barefoot, wearing a soft black t-shirt and gray sweatpants, seated at the edge of the couch with a book in his hand, and the city spread like a dream behind him. He looked up, his eyes unreadable but warm, and said nothing at first. She stood in silence, unsure how to cross the space between them. Then he said quietly, "Did you sleep?" She shook her head. "Me neither," he said. She moved to sit beside him, not touching, but closer than before. "I shouldn't have let that happen," she whispered. He looked at her. "You think I regret it?" She didn't answer. "I don't," he said. "But I regret that you looked scared after. Not of me, of yourself." She turned to him slowly. "Because I don't know who I am when I stop hiding." He tilted his head slightly. "Then maybe we find out together." She stared at him, heart thudding, then asked, "Why me?" His jaw flexed slightly, then relaxed. "Because you showed up in my world and refused to be impressed by it. You didn't shrink, you didn't chase, you just were. And that's rare." She nodded slowly. "And what happens when I stop being rare?" "Then I'll remind you," he said softly, "of the first time I saw you, dripping wet, shivering, and trying so hard not to let me see how much you needed someone to wrap you in something warm." That night, they didn't touch. Not really, but they didn't separate either. She fell asleep on his couch again, this time with her head resting against his shoulder, and he didn't move for hours. When she woke up, the blanket had slipped, and his arm was around her waist like a promise made in silence. She didn't leave. She stayed for breakfast. She stayed while he worked in the other room. She read one of his books, curled on the lounge chair, and when he came to check on her, he said nothing, just leaned down and kissed the top of her head like it was the most natural thing he'd ever done. By the end of the week, she had her own mug in his kitchen, a folded blanket on his couch, a toothbrush tucked quietly beside his. Still, nothing was said, no labels, no declarations. But something had shifted. They didn't just orbit anymore. They moved together. And then came the evening she found him staring out the window, glass untouched in his hand, expression blank. "Talk to me," she said softly. He didn't answer. "Daman," she said, stepping closer, "please." He looked at her finally, eyes tired. "I had a brother," he said. She froze. "Had?" He nodded slowly. "Older, smarter, the kind of person people followed without question. He died when I was 23. Motorcycle accident. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't speak for a week. After that, I built walls. I stopped needing people. I became the man everyone thought could never break. Because if I broke, I wouldn't know how to put myself back together." She moved toward him slowly, gently taking the glass from his hand and setting it aside. "You don't have to fix yourself with me," she said. "I'm not here to watch you shatter. I'm here to hold the pieces." He exhaled, and it sounded like surrender. And then he reached for her, arms sliding around her waist, pulling her into him like she was the anchor keeping him from drifting out to sea. She held him there, heart to heart, silence humming like safety. Later, they sat side by side on the floor, backs against the couch, knees brushing, her hand tucked into his. "I used to think being touched meant being taken," she said suddenly, "that the only reason anyone wanted me was for what I could give, not for who I was." He turned his head toward her. "Who told you that?" "No one had to," she said. "Life did. Every time I was looked at like a thing. Every time a man assumed the price of my body was a smile and a thank you. Every time I said no, and it wasn't heard." He closed his eyes. "I'm listening now." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I'm still here." That night she undressed again, not because she was soaked, not because she needed to dry off, but because she wanted him to see her by choice. Every layer she removed, she did slowly, deliberately, with eyes on his. And when she stood bare before him, she didn't feel small. She felt seen, revered, wanted, not as a fantasy, as a truth. He stepped toward her, hands warm, sliding over her shoulders, down her arms, eyes never leaving hers. And when he touched her, it wasn't urgent, it wasn't rough, it was worship. His mouth traced the curve of her collarbone, his hands moved like they were memorizing her shape. He kissed the scar on her thigh, like it was a secret worth keeping. She gasped when he sank to his knees in front of her, not because she was afraid, but because no one had ever knelt before her like she mattered. "You're trembling," he whispered. I'm not scared, she said. Then what is it? I've never been loved like this. He looked up at her, eyes burning. Neither have I. That night, they didn't sleep apart. They didn't sleep much at all. But what they shared wasn't about climax. It was about connection, skin against skin, heart against heart, the kind of intimacy that left fingerprints on the soul. And when they finally collapsed in tangled sheets, limbs entwined, breaths shared, she whispered, "You don't have to protect me." "I'm not," he murmured. "I'm letting you in." She smiled into his chest, heartful. "Then don't lock the door behind me." He kissed her hair. "I never will." The mornings began to feel like rhythm. She would wake before him, stretch slowly in the soft light that filtered through the glass walls, wrap herself in his oversized shirt, and pad barefoot to the kitchen where she would make coffee. She still wasn't sure he liked the way she made, but he drank it anyway. He never said thank you, not aloud, but the way he watched her, as she moved, the unspoken gravity in his gaze said more than words ever could. He had stopped asking why she stayed. She had stopped pretending she wasn't terrified of what it meant to be this close to someone who could break her open without even touching her. But the fear wasn't enough to stop her anymore. It wasn't enough to make her run. Not yet. Not until the outside world caught up to them. It started with a text, a photo, a blurry image of her exiting a black SUV outside the penthouse at dawn, hair wild, legs bare, his shirt half tucked into the waistband of her shorts. She stared at it on her phone, stomach clenching. There was no caption. There didn't need to be. The image said everything. By noon, it was on a blog. By 3, the office was whispering. By 5, there was a memo from HR asking for a confidential conversation. She didn't bring it up to him at first. She thought maybe if she didn't speak it, it would fade. But it didn't. It got louder. The headlines grew crueler. Billionaire caught sleeping with hired help. Delivery girl wraps more than just packages. She couldn't even look at her own reflection without hearing the echo of their judgment. So when she finally walked into his office, shut the door behind her and said, "We have a problem," he already knew. He didn't say anything at first, just looked up, eyes unreadable, mouth tight. She held up the printed screenshots. "They know," she said. "Everyone knows." He stood slowly. "And what exactly do they think they know?" She exhaled. "That I'm sleeping with you, that I used you, that this whole thing was manipulation, some stupid Cinderella fantasy where the girl from the wrong side of the service elevator gets her hands on the man in the penthouse." He moved toward her. "You didn't use me." "It doesn't matter," she snapped, "because that's the story now, and we both know what happens to girls in stories like this. We disappear." His voice softened. "You're not disappearing." "Then do something," she said. "Say something. Show them it's not a game." He looked at her, long and slow. "Are you asking me to go public?" "I'm asking you to stop hiding behind silence." He didn't answer, not with words. Instead, he walked around his desk, picked up his phone, and made a call. "This is Damen Cross," he said into the receiver. "Schedule a press briefing, tomorrow, 8 a.m., no script, no filters." Then he hung up. She stared at him. "You'd really do that?" He met her gaze. "You're not my secret. You're the first thing in my life I've wanted to claim without apology." And that's when she realized what scared her most. It wasn't the press. It wasn't the backlash. It was the possibility that he meant it. That he would stand in front of the world and say her name like it mattered. That night, they didn't speak much. He poured wine. She watched him from the couch, bare legs tucked under her, mind spinning. When he sat beside her, he didn't reach for her body. He reached for her hand. "If this ends badly," she whispered, "I want you to know I never came here looking for you." Not like this. He squeezed her fingers gently. And I never looked at you and saw anything less than mine. The next morning, the room was packed. Cameras, reporters, flashes. He stood in front of them like a man who had spent his whole life commanding rooms. But when he opened his mouth, his voice was different. Softer. Raw. "There's been a lot of noise this week," he began. "Speculation. Accusation. Most of it is wrong, but some of it is true. I have been spending time with a woman who entered my life unexpectedly. She didn't come with titles. She didn't come with connections. She came with truth, and I'd rather burn my reputation than let that truth be twisted by anyone else." Gasps, clicks, whispers, and then he said her name, clearly, without hesitation. And the world shifted. He didn't say he loved her. He didn't have to. She was watching from the hallway, heart in her throat, hands trembling. When he stepped off the podium, the first place he went was to her. The cameras didn't follow. He didn't let them. He kissed her in the elevator, not like a performance, but like a promise. "You didn't have to do that," she said against his mouth. "I did," he murmured, "because you undressed more than just my body. You stripped the part of me that thought vulnerability was weakness." She pulled back just slightly, eyes glistening. "So what happens now?" He smiled, slow and dangerous. "Now, the real game begins." They didn't go home that night. Not to the penthouse, not to the city. He booked a private car that took them to the coast, to a house she hadn't known he owned, a place hidden by cliffs and silence, where the ocean met the edge of the world and nobody asked questions. She didn't need to pack. He didn't ask her to. He just said, "Come with me." And she did. For 3 days they didn't look at headlines. They didn't check emails. They stayed wrapped in salt air and linen sheets, in whispered conversations, and bodies too tangled to pull apart. He watched her sketch beside the window, with her knees tucked to her chest. She watched him forget how to be a man who built walls for a living. They cooked without recipes. They kissed without hesitation. They slept like they hadn't in years. And in those quiet hours between sunset and sleep, she started to believe maybe they'd found a way to outrun the noise. But peace is always temporary when you come from a world that feeds on chaos. On the 4th morning, he got a call. He didn't answer at first. She watched him stare at the screen, thumb hovering, jaw tight. Then he stood up, walked outside, and didn't come back in for an hour. When he did, his face had changed. She sat up slowly. "What is it?" He didn't answer right away. Then he exhaled. "Someone leaked your employment file, the original delivery application, the security cam footage from the first night." Her stomach dropped. "Who?" "We don't know yet, but it's everywhere." She stood, heart pounding. "What does that mean?" "It means the story just got new teeth. They're painting it as a calculated move, a social climb, a seduction strategy. They're quoting your old boss, your rent history, even pulling photos from your high school yearbook." She backed away. "They think I planned this?" "They want to." He stepped closer. "Because it's easier to believe you were after power than to admit you just mattered." Her voice cracked. "I can't fight that." "You don't have to, Aki." He said, I will." "No," she said suddenly, louder than she meant to. "You can't protect me from something you helped create." He froze. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" she said, chest rising fast. "You brought me into your world without asking what it would cost me. You opened the door but didn't stay to hold it when the wind knocked me off my feet." "I'm still here," he said. "I didn't run." "But you didn't ask either," she whispered. "Not when," they whispered. "Not when they looked at me like I was a mistake you made. You just assumed I'd be strong enough to carry it." His voice dropped. "You are strong." "That's not the point," she said, shaking her head. "I don't want to survive you. I want to belong with you. And right now, I don't. He looked at her, face unreadable. Then what are you saying? She looked down. I need space, not because I don't want this, but because I don't know who I am inside your world anymore. Silence thickened between them. And if you leave, he said quietly, if I leave and you still want me when the noise dies down, maybe we try again. Maybe? He asked, voice breaking just slightly. I'm not good with maybes. Neither am I, she said, but it's the only honest thing I can offer right now. She left that afternoon, didn't pack much, just the sketch pad she'd been filling since the day he gave her the towel, and the memory of his mouth on her skin like a prayer. He didn't stop her, he just stood at the edge of the doorway and whispered, if this is what you need, I'll wait. She didn't turn back. Couldn't. Because if she looked at him one more time, she'd never go. The next days passed in a blur. She stayed at a friend's loft downtown, changed her number, disconnected everything that had tied her to his world. She watched herself trend and burn online, her face cut into pieces and pasted into headlines she never asked to be part of. She stopped answering calls, stopped opening emails. She barely left the apartment, but she drew. She filled page after page with the curve of his jaw, the hollow of his throat, the moment he looked at her like she was sunlight. And then one night, when the city was rain-drenched and the sirens outside blurred into silence, she opened her inbox to find one email. No subject line, no body text, just an image, a scanned page from one of her sketches, the one of her sitting curled in a chair the night after she told him she was afraid of disappearing. At the bottom of the image, he had written 4 words in black ink. I still see you. She stared at it for a long time. Then she cried for the first time since she left. She didn't answer the email, not at first. She read it, closed it, opened it again, then sat staring at the screen while the night dragged itself into morning. There was nothing else. No questions, no demands, just that one sketch, that one line, written like a promise. She still remembered the way he had looked at her the night they met, half amused, half intrigued, like she was a puzzle he didn't expect to solve. And somehow, even now, after everything, he still looked at her like she was worth understanding. 3 days later, she stood outside the same building where everything had started. She didn't tell him she was coming. She didn't wear makeup or heels or anything expensive. She wore jeans, a plain sweater, and the same delivery bag she had kept in her closet, like a reminder of where she came from. The security guard didn't stop her. The elevator ride felt endless. Her reflection in the chrome walls was older now, not in years, but in experience, in the quiet heaviness that came with surviving your own story. When the doors opened, the floor was quiet. His office lights were on. She stepped inside without knocking. He was seated at his desk, fingers paused above his keyboard, like he'd been expecting her for days. Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke. Not yet. Then he stood slowly, as if afraid that even the smallest movement might scare her away again. She didn't move. I thought maybe, he started, then stopped. She shook her head. Don't talk yet. She walked toward him slowly, heart pounding, until she stood close enough to feel the heat of his breath. That email, she said quietly. That line you wrote. I didn't know how much I needed to hear it until I did. He swallowed. I didn't know how to say anything else. You didn't have to, she said. You just had to show up. I was scared, he admitted. Not of the press, not of the fallout, of you, of what I felt, of how easy it was to want you and how impossible it felt to deserve you. She reached for his hand. You still don't understand, do you? You were never supposed to deserve me. You were supposed to choose me anyway. His fingers tightened around hers. I do. She smiled, small and aching. Then we start from here. Not as your assistant, not as your escape, just as a woman who took her shirt off to dry and accidentally found something worth staying for. He smiled back, finally, the kind of smile that didn't belong to a CEO or a billionaire, just a man who had lost something and gotten it back without even knowing how. She stepped closer, pressed her forehead to his. "No more running," she whispered. "No more hiding," he replied. And when he kissed her, it wasn't about lust or power or fixing something broken. It was about breathing, about coming home, about finally being seen, not as a mistake, not as a rumor, but as something real. They didn't need to say anything else, not then, because the world outside would keep spinning, the headlines would fade, and the tower would still stand. But this moment, this quiet, steady, undeniable truth between them, this was theirs, and it was enough.